Hi folks, we've got Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the so-called protests and the marches and the ginning up of fake outrage in the United States about the policies of the new administration of President Trump, and in particular the cutting waste on various flaky programs and so on, but also the mass or the attempt at deportations, which isn't turning into a mass deportation, not so far anyway. If you look at the numbers that are being arrested and deported, given that these are supposedly the worst criminals and so on, at the rate they're going, they're lucky to even deport 150,000 people in the next 12 months, which is well shy of the 10 to 15 million that has been talked about. Anyway, coming to the, I looked at a number of these protests, and what intrigues me is that protesting about deportation, and they're waving primarily Mexican, but also other South American flags like the Colombian flag and Guatemala and Venezuela and so on. So these people have left their basket case shithole, dirt poor countries where they've got, as they would see it, no future. They've illegally come to the United States, and they proudly say, "No, I'm Mexican." Even people that have been there for 20 years. "No, I'm Mexican," and proudly so. And "Don't you dare touch me, I'm Mexican." And so if you're Mexican, you're waving Mexican flags, you can barely speak a word of English. Why don't you go back to Mexico if it's so fantastic? No, I'm not going back to that basket case. I want to stay here in America amongst all these evil fascist Nazi gringos. Try and square that one away if you can. So there are these various protests. Now, I've looked at a number of protests, and over the I've never yet seen an organic leftist protesting for mass migration, or protesting against deportation, or protesting against violence against women, all these sorts of causes that the globalists aggressively push and have pushed for quite some time. And none of them are organic. They're all bought and paid for. And there's a vast network of agitators, stirrers, and NGO people who can rustle up a multiple thousand placard waving crowd for any cause, climate, it could be anything, and these zombies just go around, go, "Yeah, whoa, hey, ho, ho," and da 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 da, and then all this sort of silly nonsense. And none of it's, again, natural or organic or grassroots. All of it's bought and paid for. All of it's put together and assembled by professional agitators. Not everyone knows that, but when I first looked, one of the first sort of things that I looked at, this is years ago now, and I was in a hotel in an Australian city, and it was a high-rise hotel, and I could see the buses bussing in the supposed protesters, and how food and water and latrines were being put in place, and how it was very organized. The bullhorn, there were people down in a parking lot area with the bullhorns practicing their chants and their little dance routines and so on. The college kids and the like. And I noticed that some of these agitators, the bullhorn, the chant leaders, were quite professional. They'd obviously done it many times before. And then I encountered a number of them in another city a few weeks later. So there's a professional flying squad of agitators that are moved around to again, stir up the zombies and get them out onto the street. So this idea that these things are, but I also noticed that the people who were doing the marching, they were college kids who were getting the day off, senior high school kids, or even younger than that sometimes, being given the day off by "Hey, I'm going to give you kids the day off. You go over there and it's like a school excursion or something. You go over there and start waving placards and screaming, this, that, and the next thing, and be outraged and so on." So They send it. Now, on top of that, the teachers are there, teachers' unions, trade union people are well represented, government employees, especially local government and regional government type employees. So when you look at how many people are actually in the crowd because they believe this is the crowd protesting because they believe in or think that it's a real important issue, important enough that they're going to get out of bed early in the morning and do that, and none of them are I don't think there's any there. If you took away the professional agitator class and the kids have been given a day off, all that sort of stuff, I don't think there'd be anybody there. If there would, there'd be half a dozen people. There'd be almost nothing. And when you see a protest that is genuinely grassroots and has no financial backing or support or anything like that, then you're lucky to get 100 people who really believe in it. To get up on that cold morning and go, you'd be lucky to get 100 people. Lucky to get 100 people. But when you have these lavishly funded protests, then they can turn out a big crowd, no problem. Now, the cost of doing these things is huge. Just the cost of hiring that many buses with drivers, the insurance, the fuel, or hiring all those latrines. The councils often charge money for putting them there, putting them in, locating them in certain areas. You've got to pay for permits. Where does all the food that's being distributed, all the water, all the people to run around and distribute it amongst the crowd, and so on and so forth? Where does all the money come from to do that? It's not cheap to put on these things. Now we know that this money comes from not just George Soros or whatever, but it's coming through organisations like USAID and the whole array of NGOs that are funded by. So effectively, Western taxpayers are being looted of the tax revenue, and that revenue is then used to hate on the same taxpayers that are having the money stolen from them. It's insane. So coming back to the US thing there, these protests aren't as voluminous in terms of the people on the ground as they used to be. But just watching the footage, there's a lot of college kids, senior high school kids there. There's some adults there that look like the professional agitator class, maybe teachers and so on, that are there just to fortify the students' outrage, those sorts of things. So there's not that same. It's doubtful that the school kids themselves are illegals. It's possible, but nonetheless, and a lot of those flags look like they've just been taken out of the pack. These people don't keep Mexican flags in their houses, so someone's buying those flags and distributing them. And while the kids are there, also I've noticed that they're getting. There are people there with drinks and food that are being distributed. I assume it's free. I can't see any money changing hands. So again, who's paying for all that? Now the college kids, the senior high school kids, they've got that sort of stuff. Weren't so many adults at these ones. There were some, but weren't so many. So what are they protesting about exactly? Some of them, if you listen to, they've never even been in Mexico, or they only went there to visit their grandparents or something. These sorts of things. So it's hardly grassroots, and there's a lot of young kids who have little comprehension, if any, about what's going on, that are being used by whatever. But someone's paying for all that. So go and chase the money. The size of some of that. You go online, have a look at the size of some of these flags. 2 meter by 2 meter size, and you have a look, and there are hundreds of them. Those flags. So who's paying for that? These downtrodden people that are supposed to be cleaners, their parents are working as cleaners or in take-out chicken shops. They can't afford that sort of money for those sorts of things. So it's worth a look at. Now, the other thing that sort of surprised me about these protests is, why does ICE not have rapid response flying squads around all the major cities? LA and being a prime sort of thing. Why don't they have these rapid and then move in and kettle the have drones flying around, photographing these people and doing facial recognition, all that sort of stuff. Why aren't they closing in on all the streets around and doing ID checks and so on? There's a great opportunity to be able to sweep up 1,000 or so people at a time in just one spot, rather than having to go door to door. And only through this sort of bulk mass capturing are they going to be able to get anywhere near the numbers that they're thinking of. So nonetheless, I mean, there'll be other things, given now that this Social Security numbers fraud matching is about to be instituted. This will make a big difference. But having a look at those, none of those protests, certainly that I've seen anywhere in the United States, protesting the mass repatriation and so on, none of it is organic, not a bit of it, which makes you wonder how many people would really protest this if they weren't incited and agitated, and where they weren't funded and encouraged. And I don't know if there would be many. But as long as these fake protests go on, it gives the illegals hope that somehow there'll be some sort of breakthrough, and that they'll be allowed to illegally, as they are staying, they'll be allowed to stay. So they'll hesitate and think maybe they're going to self-deport. So that it encourages them to believe they're part of the resistance, and that's not a good thing, because ultimately that will lead to, I would suspect, violent confrontations at some point, which is just not good optics for anybody. You've been at Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.